Good evening, I'm May Bullman, Social Affairs Correspondent at The Independent, and welcome to this panel discussion on the rights of migrant domestic workers, which forms part of the British Academy Summer Showcase. As part of my work, I've covered migrant domestic workers' rights quite extensively in recent years, particularly in the past year or so, with a focus on the impact of coronavirus on this group, as the pandemic has led to many losing their jobs or becoming more vulnerable in the workplace. So this discussion is a particularly timely one, even more so given the fact that tomorrow will be the 10th International Domestic Workers' Day, which we'll be returning to later. But without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our wonderful speakers to the virtual stage, and I will now defer to them to introduce themselves. Marissa, would you like to start us off?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having us, the British Academy, to Ella and May. Thank you so much to all everybody to make possible today, and especially for making this discussion very focused on migrant domestic workers. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ella Parry-Davies. I'm a British Academy Research Fellow. Again, thanks to everyone. It's wonderful to have this space and to be in such expert company. Thank you.
And I think Mimi's just joined us. Hi, Mimi. Can you introduce yourself? Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, I'll introduce myself. Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm Mimi, a legal trustee of the Voice of Domestic Workers. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. So just to say, to explain the structure of this panel event, we'll speak in conversation for around 30 minutes before opening up to audience questions for 15 minutes. If you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And if it's for a particular panelist, do make that clear in your alongside your question. But to begin with, I'm keen to know, you've obviously all introduced yourselves, but it'd be great to know how you've all come to work together.
You want to go? I can go first. I think I met you, May, when I gave oral evidence in the parliament about NHS and digital sharing. And I was wondering why she knows what I'm doing. So we didn't know, actually, I didn't know we were live in the parliament at that time. So that was fun. But also because you always write article about us. We also contact you always whenever we have even an important policy to lobby. Yeah, so we're very grateful that you're always there for us. Yeah, to Ella, I think you had research before.
Yeah, so I think I reached out to you about 3 years ago, probably at the beginning of my current research project with the British Academy. So I'm working with the migrant domestic workers in the UK and Lebanon, and the Voice of Domestic Workers, which Marissa is the director of, was obviously kind of my first port of call as a self-organized group. And since then I've been working, especially with Mimi, very closely on a collaborative creative sound project, which I think we'll come to a little bit later, but have been kind of tagging along to lots of events at The Voice, and doing some more kind of interpersonal collaborations as well since then.
I think Mimi, the first time I met her, I think Mimi, we sometimes we do our classes in the park. We're not always inside. So Hyde Park is always our favorite place. I think Mimi, that's where you came, yeah? First time?
Yeah, I came to the Voice of Domestic Workers 2016. The first time I came there there was an event in the park in front of the parliament. And then I worked, I've been an active member since 2016 up to the present. And then after 2.5 years working with The Voice, I've been the legal trustee of The Voice. With Ella, I met her because she came to The Voice to volunteer, and she approached me to participate in her project in Soundwalk. That's where I started to work with Ella to do the Soundwalk. So I'm already working. It's my second Soundwalk now. The first one was about my story, and I have I'm doing another sound walk with her. It's the trip of the voice of domestic workers, the life of the domestic workers when it's their off.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think we'll hear a bit more about that later. I'm really keen to find out a bit more about that sound walk. But just Marissa and Mimi, I'm keen to hear a bit more about the voice of domestic workers and how it came to be. You know, it was founded in 2009, is that right?
Yeah.
And how did it all start?
We actually started 2008. It was established March 2009. Like my fellow domestic workers, I think at that time I was also suffering from trauma because I've been abused also by different employers, you know. But I have this natural I think courage, you know, to fight back, you know, like even in a situation that I was almost been raped, I could come out on how I could save myself, you know, how I could fight this employer, no matter how big was that male employer, yeah. And I could escape that difficult situation, yeah. And I've seen right in front of me, you know, because I was standing in front of United Union, I was just asking questions, what this trade union could do for me as individual worker. And in that point, I've seen so many fellow domestic workers who have been raped, who have been poured by hot water, who have been physically beaten, and some of them are barefooted, you know, they don't have shoes and they escape without anything, you know, just the clothes they were wearing on that day. And I've seen all this and I just asked myself, what? I thought I was already the worst case in that situation, but seeing those in front of me, it's just I feel the outrage, the anger. We need to do something, and even me being in a very traumatic condition at that time, I was slowly healed upon witnessing all those in my eyes, and the need for us to group together. I think that's the beginning of it actually, and at the time that maybe.
Have we lost Marissa? Marissa? Mimi, do you want to? Are you able to? I know that Marissa kind of started the voice, but are you able to just explain what happened? You know, how exactly it came to being? I mean, I know you joined later on, but you know, why is it's such an incredible thing that's saved so many women and people in these situations? You know, what can you say about the
because when I joined the Voice of Domestic Workers, it's not charity yet. It's Justice for Domestic Workers when I joined them. Then 2017 when it became charity. So I came there when I'm already lost my visa. I don't have right to work, and then I saw how they, you know, it's not. I thought that I'm in the bad situation, but I just found out that they are worse than me. So it's been my passion, my anger in the system where I am now. My anger became passion to be active and to support other workers because for me, and I've been in front of the voice in campaign, because for me, as I said, as I always said that if I will not stand up and be the voice, how no one can hear and see these vulnerable workers. So my anger turned into passion, really, because I'm said to myself that there are still thousands of migrant women coming in the country, and the situation will always be happen over and over again repeatedly, that they cannot be seen, they can't be seen and be heard.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to the coronavirus outbreak, I mentioned earlier that, domestic workers have had a really tough time during this pandemic for various reasons. Can you tell me about the unique issues and challenges facing domestic workers during this period?
I think Mimi and Marissa will be able to speak to perhaps their own experiences and those of their colleagues within The Voice, but from a a researcher perspective, I heard from around 80 Filipino migrants, many of whom were domestic workers or doing domestic and care work, in June last year. So in the first few months of the pandemic, or at least in the UK, the pandemic in the UK. And over half of them had lost all of their work and income. Domestic workers are obviously frontline, but they don't have the kind of visibility that is allocated to the NHS, for example, to NHS workers. Mimi's told me several times that she works behind closed doors, and I think that's a really powerful way of putting it. Domestic workers are often very precarious financially, and perhaps also because of their migration status. And that makes it really difficult to stand up to employers and demand proper PPE, for example, or working hours, or safe and healthy working conditions. So I think we've the pandemic has exacerbated, but also revealed that domestic workers are at a really sharp end of social inequality, and that puts them at a lot of risk. Yeah,
thanks, Ella. And Mimi, just briefly, do you want to just explain how the pandemic has affected you and your work?
Yeah, when the pandemic struck last year, me personally lost my job. Same with other members. Most of us lost their job. They got terminated without notice when this pandemic strikes. And honestly, the Voice of Domestic Workers supported more than 100 of migrant domestic workers, members who lost their job, for their food allowance, for their for rent, just for them not to be homeless. But many got infected. All of us got affected. Many of us got infected because one of the reason there is of the employers being careless, not following the rules of this pandemic. They invited guests. They don't care about their domestic worker. So we have some cases that our domestic worker got infected because of the carelessness of these employers.
Yeah, that's really concerned. I actually wrote a piece about that, I think late last year, and spoke to some women who had just had the most awful time because they just were stuck in these homes where people weren't sticking to the rules in any way. Really worrying. And now just moving on to take a slightly broader look, we know much is written in the media about migration, and it's certainly a very toxic issue in British politics at the moment and has been in sort of recent decades. But often migrant women's first-hand experiences seem to be missing from the narrative. How have you been working to address this imbalance and bring women's voices to the fore? I think we go to Ella on that one because I know you're working on a project about this at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So the research that I'm doing, which is supported by the British Academy currently, is based around making sound walks. So they are guided audio tours that take place in spaces that domestic workers have chosen for their significance. So that might be Hyde Park, for example, where one collaborator escaped from abusive employers, and she now returns there to support other women who need to leave their employers. And we will record a conversation there and then work together to edit that conversation into a sound walk, which members of the public can download and return to that place and listen to the voice of that person explaining why it's so significant to them. so I kind of avoid the term putting yourself in the shoes of, because I think we have to be respectful of the fact that we can never fully kind of understand or know what it's like to experience somebody else's life. But think of it a bit like, if you could go for a walk with this person, this is what it might sound like. And the responses to that project from domestic workers who are participating and collaborating on the sound walks has been really, really varied. So, you know, one of them might be about escaping from abusive employers. Another one is about a guitarist in a church band who's struggling with her sexuality and the homophobia of the church community, as well as having been a domestic worker for 35 years in Lebanon. So there are a real kind of mix of different stories there, and often we're not really hearing those in the mainstream media. I think that that domestic workers are often portrayed in quite reductive terms sometimes. There's only kind of one angle on the story being taken, and often it is about exploitation and abuse. And that's not to say those things don't happen. They do, and it's really important that the perpetrators are accountable and that has visibility. But I think it's also important to kind of hear about other stories. And what's so amazing about collaborating with The Voice is that the story of activism has come through really, really strongly. What domestic workers are doing to organise and to support one another and to kind of gain visibility for issues like the ILO Convention, which I think we'll come to in a bit. So that project is really about kind of putting domestic workers at the centre of what narratives are, what stories get told about their experiences through the co-editing process that kind of shapes how they choose to represent themselves and their experiences.
Amazing. Yeah, that sounds like such a brilliant idea. I mean, I find sometimes in my work, it, like you say, it has the angle, you know, it's a certain angle. You can't always get the voices fully in there, but it always works better the more voice of the person, you know, of the domestic worker you're talking about, the more of their voices in there, the better. So that sounds like such a brilliant idea. And Mimi, so you've been working with Ella to record and edit soundwalks about your experiences and perspectives on these issues. How have you found this process, and what's special about, you know, amplifying your voice as a migrant domestic worker?
Yeah, actually, I'm very grateful for Dr. Ella for giving me this opportunity to learn to edit the sound. But what I'm really grateful for is through that artistic way in editing the soundwalk. I express myself. I can voice out what we need, what the migrant women, what the migrant women workers need, especially in this in the system. So it's not only for although the first handbook that I've done is all about myself. But, when I'm trying to do it, when I'm trying to hearing it, I make sure that the things that I've said is all for all of us. That even if it's my own story, but I still try to bring my fellow domestic workers in my heart. For me to be able to make that soundwalk very effective, and so I know many migrant domestic workers who can relate on that soundwalk. Yeah. So it's very very amazing new skill. But when I'm doing that one, I'm in my mind I am representing myself, representing the migrant domestic workers who are unseen and unheard. So that's it's not only a skill, but also a way of reaching out people and to tell them that, and to voice them what we want to, what we need to.
I think what's really amazing about collaborating with Mimi as well, we recorded a conversation, and we spent about 13 hours, I think, over several days, at least 13 hours sitting down together editing. And anyone who's ever done sound or video editing will know that it's an incredibly slow process. It's really like a very painstaking process. And Mimi learned the editing software, I mean, from A to Z. She's a pro now and is actually editing a soundboard completely independently of me in the pandemic, which is tells the story of a trip to the beach in Dorset that the Voice of Domestic Workers organised on Sunday, which is most domestic workers' only day off. So yeah, I'm kind of not really involved in that at all. Mimi's kind of taken the project and run with it, which is fantastic. And it's been a really, really rewarding collaboration on my side too.
That sounds so brilliant. And just leading on from what Ella you were sort of talking about earlier on this idea of victim narrative, and the way that sometimes, particularly in the media, migrant domestic workers can be portrayed, first and foremost as victims rather than workers or people in their own right. How do you guys look to challenge this? I don't know who's the best person to respond to that, but yeah, I think that's a real kind of challenge at the moment from my perspective, ensuring that migrant domestic workers are seen as workers as opposed to victims initially.
Yeah. Okay, I think it all began when the government removed all the rights of migrant domestic workers in 2012. So those rights were the right to change employer, right to renew visa, right to settlement, and right to British citizenship. These rights were all scrapped in 2012, and then they put up the national referral mechanism of the trafficking law. We have this now Modern Slavery Act, so wherein domestic workers had no choice, had no other option but to apply. That's why I always say this is by force, because that's the only available option they have in front of them since 2012 until now. And because they remove that, especially the right to the visa, they may have reinstated during the Modern Slavery Act review in 2015 and 2016 was reinstated the right to change employer, but that right to change employer is within 6 months only, without the right to renew visa. That is actually useless, the very limited time, 6 months. Sometimes we found them like they contacted us, they needed to be rescued, the employer are abusing them, are hitting them, are even in the sexual harassment. We always receive calls from domestic workers that they're being sexually harassed, abused by male employers, and for me to even to say that this is the law now, you have no right to renew the visa, you will be undocumented. But if they're being sexually harassed, they are being raped already, we will immediately go wherever they are. However, if they are complaining of non-salary, they never receive salary for many months, for many days, then for many months, then we still have to tell them, guys, if we rescue you, if we go there and rescue you, you will lose your visa and you cannot renew here. So the more you will be abused. But the question is not receiving salary is not abuse? That is abuse. It's not having a day off, not abuse. It's not having rest, not abuse, because we found them almost 24 hours work. They're looking after the children, the elderly, which are 24 hours work plus the general housework. And we want to emphasize this, so really very straightforward, that domestic workers are not victim. The reason why they are linked as victim of this modern slavery and trafficking is because of the absence of the rights. You remove all those rights, their ability to access the employment law that is actually technically should apply to them, but if they lose the visa, then those laws are no use, so they couldn't access because they all become undocumented. And I think one good example here is Mimi. She came to us, she already had no visa. We found out she had no visa, so even we refer her to national referral mechanism of this trafficking law. She passed the positive reasonable ground, the first stage. She had no right to work. So what point of having that protection that also don't recognize them as workers, also don't allow them to work? So this is the complication that we are currently to explain to the government, that domestic workers are workers, victims are victims. We have no against this policy, but we are against that domestic workers are being classified altogether in this trafficking. And not everybody could pass, because if they complain only of not having salary, they fail. Because I think for me, the way I would define the national referral mechanism of this trafficking law is, you need to be raped, to be beaten, to be starved to almost death to access protection. Yeah, so the modern slavery discuss about, I think there are 3 P's in the modern slavery: prevention, protection, and prosecution. Okay, but the overseas domestic worker visa was the best proven prevention for migrant domestic workers, but what is happening now since 2012, the migrant domestic workers are the one actually being prosecuted, because the moment they lost their visa, they are at risk of being arrested, detained, and deported. Yeah. So we've seen this problem worse during the COVID, during the pandemic, the 1 year, and they're so scared to access, to go to emergency even they have COVID already, yeah, or even to access the test, what is that called test, the COVID test. Yeah, they are access to afraid to do that, and they couldn't complain. Even they're very scared to look after a COVID family, because obviously they will be infected, like Mimi said. They've been infected, but also I think when they look for a job, these employers won't tell them that they have actually COVID, and then the domestic workers are there already. What could they do? And for domestic workers to even ask me, I'm very ill now, I have COVID now, what shall I do? I say, get out. I will look for a place for you to stay where you are alone. So I had to do that. We have to do that. We have done so much, but I think that the bottom line is here, the domestic workers have no rights at all. And what century we are in now? And we are pushing for this International Labor Organization Convention on Domestic Workers, which really recognize domestic workers as workers. It's not just about the UK domestic workers, but also other domestic workers worldwide. So we're hoping so much that UK government will look at the problem, because this problem, there's no way they could sweep this away under the carpet. We will make noise. We will always be there, no matter what the government refusal to do the right thing. I think that petition that we had for the government, they missed to do the right thing for migrant domestic workers, to finally reinstate those rights before pre-2012 that they removed.
And just to clarify, so on the point you were just making about the International Labour Convention, I mean, that's what we mentioned earlier, the 10th International Domestic Workers' Day marks 10 years since the International Labour Convention was agreed, but very important to point out that the UK has still not ratified it. And just very briefly, Marissa, because we do need to move on to questions, but do you think this, the UK looking to ratify that could help to improve the rights of domestic workers in the UK?
Yes, definitely. Actually, UK, despite being a member of the ILO, shamefully even abstained. They didn't vote at all. And what they said, the UK already provides comprehensive employment and social protection to domestic workers, and we do not consider it appropriate or practical to extend criminal health and safety law, including inspections, to private households employing domestic workers. So this is what they said when they asked why they abstain, you know, that the rights of domestic workers that they're so proud of, you know, in say telling this in front of the world during this 2011 ILOC 189. On the following year, 2012, they removed all these rights. How is this going to help domestic workers to reclaim our rights, you know, here in the UK? The UK will then have to look at the national law, you know, that whatever the article, every article in this convention 189 have, the UK has to adjust the law. And I think the very reason they give why they are refusing to ratify it is because domestic workers are actually not covered under health and safety law. And if UK has to ratify, they have to include domestic workers in national law, and they have to reinstate all these rights of domestic workers. So we're hoping very much that everybody will support our campaign to push for the ratification of ILOC 189. What century we are in now? And this is United Kingdom, you know, who is very proud of as the world leader in eradicating or in ending the modern slavery and trafficking. But the reality is very much visible on the domestic workers' condition today.
Yeah, thanks, Marissa. We've got a couple of questions from the audience. The first one is from Fernanda, PhD student at the University of Manchester, who she'd like to know what Marissa and Mimi see the emergence of the new digital platforms. So how is this new way of finding jobs impacting the working conditions of domestic workers here in the UK? And do you see any impact on the rates and experiences of violence and harassment against migrant domestic workers?
The positive about the voice of domestic workers, we always do education, training, and empowering. Yeah, so we prepare our members to be able to defend themselves, because there is no law, yeah, that protect them. They have to defend themselves. You know, I cannot always be there with them all the time. So during the pandemic, we transform all our classes and services online. Yeah. And in terms of, there's a very visible, to be honest, there's a very visible need in the market for migrant domestic workers. Why there is a special market of migrant domestic workers in the market? Because the local people, you know, who are working as nanny, as cleaners, they have families here, and they need that certain time, you know, to work on that certain time, while migrant domestic workers are you know, could work around the needs of the employers, you know, to give them a social life, you know, so like they have party at nighttime, domestic workers will be that. But what we are saying is every work should be calculated, and they should be paid. Like if employers are working overtime, there are domestic workers working overtime that allow them to work overtime. And if they are being paid on the overtime, it's the same on domestic workers. They should pay themselves as well. So in our network, we have this kind of referral. Yeah, we seldom use agency, because as you know, most of them have no right to work. And also, even if they have right to work under this NRM, because if they apply in the national referral mechanism before the visa expired, they do have a right to work. However, that piece of paper is not being accepted by many employers, by agency, that it doesn't even say they have right to work, just they know they have right to work. That's when they ask me, because I refer her before the 6 months visa, so she does have right to work. So only that verbal, only that piece of paper, yeah. But the proper working visa that they need, they don't have that. So it's the word of mouth among our community. That's how they mostly find job. But of course, the impact also is not having rights. Employers knows they could abuse them. Actually, there are employers who are specifically looking for migrant domestic workers because they know they could abuse them. They know they could work long hours. They know that there's nothing that protects them. I would even say that the UK government actually facilitate all this abuse, because it actually give the employers, right to abuse domestic workers. So in terms of job as well, they're not paying tax and NI, and if government allow them to, it's not their fault. It's not that they don't want to pay tax and NIs. Even I think the employers are more happy that they are not paying the tax and NI, if the government allow that and regularly renew the visa. When domestic workers renew visa, they pay the visa. Everything is not free, I think it is also proven that domestic workers are independently working and supported themselves and no access to public fund, because their passport is stamped with no recourse to public funds. So digitally, there is danger, of course. That's why we're currently working actually with Oxford University. Yeah, so we will produce a digital guidelines to be able to protect domestic workers online. But also, I think the online campaigning is very important, for domestic workers. That, as you can see, I think most of our campaign graphics are being done by domestic workers themselves. So we encourage them to be more visible. Take photo of yourself while working. Be proud of yourself if you want the change, if you want respect. Be proud of who we are and what we are. That actually domestic work is decent work. Domestic workers are workers, yeah.
And we are running out of time, so I think we've got a couple more questions. So if we can try and make it just a minute per question, unfortunately, because we're tight for time. Are domestic workers not covered by the human rights law? Asks Nikki in the audience.
Mimi has that end. Okay, that's one thing we could use. So we always tell this our members that even there's no rights for you, do not forget that you are still human being. Therefore, there is human rights that we can use. So I think, Mimi, I don't want to speak on your behalf. You want to talk about your situation?
Because when they grant me when they gave me this positive reasonable ground, I don't have right to work for almost 3 years, more than 3 years, yeah. Almost. Then they grant me this visa, this domestic worker visa for 2 years, and then pandemic came. I got my ID in December. March was lockdown, so I didn't use my visa to find a job, a proper job, a decent job. It's just I just found a job recently, and my visa will gonna expire on December. I only have 6 months left, so I lost my visa. I lost my chance to have a decent job for more than a year, and then after after December, I will be undocumented again because my visa is not renewable. It's not extendable. So I was just saying that this NRM is really not fair for us, migrant domestic workers, because in my case that they allowed me to stay here, but they didn't give me a right to work. They grant me my visa for only 2 years. Within that 2 years, I didn't find a job right away. So it's just a waste. My visa got wasted. So it's not for me. This NRM is really not for us. It's really not fair. I don't see it. This NRM is they are implementing human rights for us, because this is not really for us.
For me, Miss Case, I've already started to look at the human rights, exceptional case for women, because I think maybe for me, that's the next forward, but I don't know, I'm not sure, but I do need the human rights solicitors expert here. So I've already started to talk to solicitors about that. I think I will specifically talk to Atleo. I think they are good at it. Yeah.
I mean, hopefully there are human rights law, rights to fall back on. But then I guess, the issue that you're talking about is that the modern slavery protections put in place don't work for domestic workers, and also the immigration law around it doesn't work. The visas don't work, so it all gets tied up in that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Very quickly, I think this will have to be our final question. Derek Gallum would like to know whether Mimi or Marissa have faced any risks as a result of your activism. Very quick responses to that.
To me, I think when we registered the Voice of Domestic Workers as charity, there are things that we were able to do during that time. I think when it was for everybody, just the Voice of Domestic Workers was formerly known as Justice for Domestic Workers, and the reason why, one of the reasons why we changed the name, because we registered to charity, and I know in that as charity we have so many things that need to adjust from being company limited guarantee to charity. So I think specifically to me, May, when I was giving the evidence, that's actually, I was one head of my head, I was like, can I say these things? I think because your charity, you need the charitable words here. So no matter how angry I was, so it's difficult for me because I had to choose the words that I'm using to be more softer. Yeah. So I think for me that's the effect, But I think on the work of the Voice of Domestic Workers, everything the same. I think we find ways how to still follow the law, but I think still do what we are usually doing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in our some of the case, when they with domestic workers got affected with this, because of, especially when the employers found out that they are member of this organization or trade union, or they are activists. Some employers don't like it, so, or they don't want to hire them. So it's a risk. Not all employers can understand that we are campaigning for our rights. Not everyone, not all the employers understands that one. There are employers that when they found out that okay, you are an active or you're a member of this, like that, so they really trying to find another domestic worker. So yeah, it's
they
just
will even
yeah.
They will even cut off the Unite the Union membership.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing that. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to ask one final question, but I'm not sure we can go a minute over. I mean, I think maybe we could go for a couple more minutes. The British Academy has termed the next 10 years the COVID decade. What challenges lie ahead for migrant domestic workers in this period? Ella, do you want to just give a brief response to that?
Yeah, sure. So the British Academy recently published an enormous body of evidence, which I think kind of confirmed the view that COVID exacerbated but didn't create, it revealed inequalities that already existed but perhaps hadn't been as visible to the general public. And as I said earlier, domestic workers are really kind of at the sharp end of many of those social inequalities. I think, there's a lot to say about this, but we can't predict exactly where the pandemic is going to go. But I think if we're going to stop exposing domestic workers to really, really serious risks at work or of destitution and possibly deportation, we need to really kind of revalue domestic work and the people who are doing it. I think what COVID has shown is how essential services really are. And domestic workers are people who need to be supported and enabled to do those jobs in a safe way. So that, I think, is really, really key. It's the kind of really wholesale cultural revaluing of domestic workers and what they do.
We are the group of workers who are looking after the children, who are looking after the elderly, who are looking after the disabled, the homes. You know, we're talking about family that made up this society, and this is how we are treating the domestic workers. I think that has to change. And when we talk about frontline workers during this pandemic, there are domestic workers who, I think almost all families were at home, you know, the children, the parents, you know, and there was just one domestic worker working down the clock, and there are employees who would come in, she's not smiling. How could she smile when you are all there? She additional work hours, no rest, no extra pay. So that has to change, and that has every work, you know, that domestic workers is being done is done by love, by care, by simply, you know, acknowledging, you know, that they also are human being, not just as workers, but also human being who needed to be cared of. You know, we could look after, but who look after domestic workers? No one. There's no policy that protect them, and these are the group of workers that allow all other work sectors to be able to work, and actually that we could say the fuel of the economy. So how could that this work not valuable, not important?
Thank you, Marissa. I think we're going to have to round it off there, but I mean, thank you so much to all of the panelists. That was such an interesting and important discussion, and you know, hopefully all your work will lead to change in the coming years, because it's such a serious problem, and I think, yeah, you've all conveyed it really, really powerfully during this discussion. So just to round off for the audience, this event forms part of the British Academy Summer Showcase, a free festival of ideas for curious minds. And the festival will run until the 19th of June, and you can find out more on the British Academy's website and social media channels. And just to note, Ella is facilitating a homemakers walking tour on Saturday as part of the festival, and you should be able to book a slot if you're keen to join on the British Academy website. So do that if you're interested. And thank you so much for watching.
Thank you, May. Thank you, Ella. Thank you, Mimi.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, British Academy.